Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about Bangladesh's strategic tightrope walk that it is trying to do in the Myanmar, especially the border areas of the Myanmar that is attached or that is nearby the Bangladesh. So let us try to understand that what actually is the problem Bangladeshi administration and the government is facing in the current scenario. So first of all, we know if you take a look at the map of the South Asia, we can see that three countries you have in this area. One is the Bangladesh in the north, then further connected to the Myanmar, you have India, the northeastern states of India, and then this is the Myanmar. And within the Myanmar, if you look closely, this red region represents a state that is the Rakhine state. Rakhine state is what we can call as the hot spot of the civil war that is raising Myanmar for last 2-3 years. And the entire Rakhine state, we can say, effectively has fell into the control of a rebel army that is referred as Arakan army. So due to the Rakhine state being captured by the Arakan army and the other parts of Myanmar being under the control of Myanmar's military junta, a civil war-like situation is looming large in this particular area as such, and this is where Bangladesh is facing a dilemma. If you try to look closely here, it is the Cox's Bazar region of Bangladesh that shares a long border with the Rakhine state currently under the capture of Arakan army. So let us try to understand that what is the dilemma Bangladesh is facing. Now, because of the civil war-like situation and the control of Arakan army over Rakhine, United Nations Refugee Agency has stated that there is a real possibility that almost 1.2 million people, most of these belong to the Rohingya community who are followers of Islam and ethnic Rakhine Buddhist as well, they face severe food shortages due to the escalating conflict. Because if you talk about the supply of aid, food aid or basic supplies of any kind of materials are largely being restricted toward the Rakhine state as such. That is why the UN has warned that due to the continuous non-availability of food and the severe food shortages, the region can witness the large-scale famine-like conditions, and this condition will further exacerbate, this condition will further intensify because of the decision taken by the Myanmar's military junta. The Myanmar's military junta has effectively blocked any kind of humanitarian access to the Rakhine region at least since 2023. So again, if we try to look here, again we look at the map here, this entire area is what is largely controlled by Myanmar's junta. This area is Rakhine state controlled by Arakan army. So for the movement of any kind of humanitarian aid through the Myanmar's territory, it has to pass to the area that is controlled by the Myanmar's military, and they are not allowing, at least since last 2 years, any kind of humanitarian aid movement in this Rakhine area as such. Other possibility that you have is the transit corridor using the Bangladesh, that means through Cox's Bazar. You can see the movement of goods and aid supplies, humanitarian aid as such, and that is where Bangladesh is facing a dilemma that we are going to discuss about that. Now, Bangladesh has other problem because of the worsening situation in the Rakhine state, and because it shares long border with the Rakhine state as we have shown in the map before, many of the refugees are fleeing and entering Bangladesh as such. And as per the record of UNHCR in the year 2023, it is believed that almost 960,000 Rohingya refugees currently are taking shelter in the Bangladesh, and it is because of the increased pressure to ensure the safety, well-being, and to ensure that they are able to get adequate food supply, Bangladesh understand that it is an extra burden on their already decrepit economy as such, and it is because of this the Bangladeshi government has come up with a proposal. The proposal is to establish a cross-border aid channel. However, this proposal is facing a fierce debate in the internally within the Bangladesh, because many other opposition political party has raised question about the sense of opening such aid corridor. Now, what is the reason behind this debate? Now, many of the strategic experts as well as the political opposition parties of Bangladesh believe that if Bangladesh indeed allows a aid corridor to be developed through its territory toward the Arakan region or Rakhine region, it can be drawn in what it refers as a proxy war, because United States, one of its objective is to ensure that Myanmar's military junta lose power, and then obviously if the Bangladesh corridor is being used for the humanitarian aid movement, it can definitely be used for the movement and supply of weapons logistic for the use by the Arakan army as such. That means even without the desire, Bangladesh can become a agent or pawn in a proxy war between US on one side who want to topple the Myanmar's junta, military junta, and on the other side you have China and Russia who have strongly backed the Myanmar's military government as such. So in this large power game being played between the great powers, the Bangladesh can become a casualty. Second is obviously, even if you are not taking into account the interference of the other countries, within Myanmar also you have the rebel groups such as Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, you have Arakan Army. So these have formed a front against the Myanmar's military government, and that has created a civil war-like situation. So any interference by Bangladesh, for example, if Bangladesh begins to supply humanitarian aid to the Rakhine region, this can be considered as a provocative stance by the Myanmar's military junta, because they can believe that through this aid corridor, weapons is also being supplied to Arakan army, which is being used against the Myanmar's military. So that will cause worsening of relation between the Myanmar's government and the Bangladesh government. So Bangladesh again will become a party to the civil war as such. And third, any kind of humanitarian interference, it is believed, can lead to a geopolitical trap, which will become very, very difficult for Bangladesh to come out of, because of both the internal changes, internal instability in Bangladesh, internal instability in Myanmar, and the great power game that is being played here as such. Now, if we try to understand a brief history that what has happened in last few years leading to this particular situation. So it was year 2017 when the Myanmar's military has expelled a large number of Rohingya population. It is believed to be about 740,000 Rohingyas. They had been expelled and they had nowhere else to go. So most of them have entered to Bangladesh, and also by using the Bangladeshi territory, many of them have taken refuge and shelter in India as well. It is because of this Bangladesh has continuously urged that UN Security Council to take a step to enforce the repatriation of refugees back to the Myanmar, because that is where they belong to. But the problem is that we know that UN Security Council is made up of 5 permanent members, and any of the permanent members can veto any particular decision, and they have a strong vote in the UNSC. And here we are seeing a kind of geopolitical gridlock, because obviously while US want the military junta to go away, to depart, and civilian government to re-establish itself, it is seen that China and Russia, they both are shielding Myanmar's military from any kind of sanctions which can weaken the grip of power by the Myanmar's military junta and such. And in this picture you can see clearly the Myanmar's military general, who is currently in the charge of the government after carrying out a coup and toppling the civilian government led by Aung San Suu Kyi, has repeatedly met both the president of Russia Vladimir Putin and the premier of China Xi Jinping. So that is the problem that Bangladesh has to face, and regionally also we can understand India has to face. In then 2023, obviously because for last 5-6 years the burden of the refugees were largely on the Bangladesh economy or Bangladesh's shoulder, we have seen a kind of donor fatigue, because UN has overall reported that it requires $876 million of fund to ensure that Rohingyas response plan is underway. Their interest can be taken care of. But only 40% of those funds the UN was able to receive. So that is because of continuously donors have been giving fund, but they cannot keep on losing the money. They cannot keep on losing their pocket for an extended duration of time. So unless and until now, if we come to a permanent solution, Rohingya crisis and overall we can say that a Rakhine crisis is expected to get worse and worse as such. 2024 again, meanwhile, Myanmar Civil War has escalated, as you discussed. Arakan army has taken control over large areas of Rakhine state and nearby Chin states as well. Then Myanmar's junta, because they feared that the Arakan army is continuously getting the supplies of weapons, arms, ammunition and all that, and they began to weaponize the aid access. Before, Myanmar's military allowed humanitarian aid to pass through the Rakhine state, and that is when they have stopped it. Arakan army, it said that it is welcoming aid, it is open for the Myanmar's military to send aid in the Rakhine region, but also there is allegation that whenever aid is coming into the Rakhine areas, because it is Arakan army which has taken control of this area, they are also diverting supplies to generate revenue for their own fight and struggle against the Myanmar's military as such. So basically, if you talk about the civilian population of Rakhine area, they are facing the double whammy. One, due to the Myanmar's junta stance, and second also because of the Arakan army stance. So basically, we can say in the conclusion that in the civil war between Arakan army and Myanmar's military, it seems that the casualty and the biggest loser is the civilian population of the Rakhine as such. Now, if we try to look at the stakeholders chessboard, we can see that Bangladesh itself is being led by an interim government, which is led by the chief advisor Muhammad Yunus, and they are facing a mounting pressure to not allow aid corridor to develop through Bangladesh into the Rakhine territory. And the reason is because it is believed that if the Rakhine army further intensify the attack against the Myanmar's military, it can cause a new wave of refugees. In the last January to December, in the last year itself, between January to December, almost 35,000 Rohingyas have fled to Bangladesh because of the worsening crisis such. Similarly, a full-scale famine, if it results in the Myanmar, especially the Rakhine state, it can further push thousands and thousands of refugees across the border. So, because of these, Bangladesh feels that there is a need to take urgent step to ensure that such crises do not worsen in the future as such. Bangladeshi Nationalist Party led by Khaleda Zia has questioned again the aid policy and the aid corridor related proposal of Bangladesh because it believes that such kind of channel will legitimize Myanmar's junta and both Arakan army. Now, obviously, Myanmar's military junta, BNP believes that they do not have a real stake or they do not have real claim on the Myanmar's politics or Myanmar's government because they have not come after being elected by the people. They have just toppled the democratically elected government of Myanmar as such. And that is why any kind of aid channel will basically legitimize such kind of control which BNP does not want. Similarly, other people fear that the Myanmar's war that is being largely played within the territory of Myanmar, if Bangladesh enters there, it can get entangled in that war. And this is not only a theoretical fear. For example, in the month of January 2025, a shell that largely was launched by Arakan army against Myanmar's military junta, it landed in the Bandarban region of the Bangladesh, and it has led to killing of or death of 2 farmers who were working the field here. So you can see that this is a clear example of the war, the civil war of Myanmar being spilled over across the Bangladeshi territory, across the Bangladeshi border as such. So these are the challenges that the government is facing as of now. Now, if you try to understand about that, what can be the way forward to the Bangladeshi administration? So here we can look at the Stephen Walt, which is who is a political scientist. He has given a theory called as balance of threat theory. Balance of threat theory largely states that any kind of alliance is based on the perceived threat by a particular nation as such. And this is something that Bangladesh should keep in mind. It should build such an alliance that can help Bangladesh in neutralizing the threat originating from the Myanmarese region as such. So first step that can be taken by Bangladesh administration is to demand a tripartite oversight, because any interference in the Myanmar just by talking and having conversation with one party will not yield desired result. For example, even if the aid corridor is established by taking into consideration and taking into conference the Arakan army, which has a control over the Rakhine state, Myanmar's military then directly can attack the aid corridor, because they have not been taken into conference, they have not been taken into or basically been included in the loop of discussion. So Myanmar's junta, Arakan army, and then Asian monitors. ASEAN, we know, is a group association for Southeast Asian nations. So this will act as a neutral body. They should be looped in to prevent any kind of politicization of the aid corridor. That means aid corridor should simply be used for providing humanitarian aid, for ensuring the movement of civilians across the Bangladesh to Myanmar, so they can be rehabilitated, resettled in the Rakhine state as such. So that is the first thing. Second, Bangladesh should secure regional guarantees. For example, in the Myanmar, Rakhine state, we have discussed that Kaladan multimodal project where India is interested in. Similarly, China has unveiled its China-Myanmar economic cooperation project. So two regional powers, China and India, also have a lot of stake in Myanmar. So any decision of Bangladesh should be taken after ensuring that these regional players are also on the board. Third is link aid to accountability. Whenever UN is providing aid to the Myanmar or Rakhine state, or even if the Bangladesh is providing aid to the Rakhine state, it should ensure that it should be supervised by a UN-led committee, and Rohingya repatriation process should largely be done, or what you can say, the entire project should largely be overtaken by the UN-led authority as such. So this Bangladesh will be able to ensure that it does not get drawn in the civil war or proxy war as such. Also, many experts have argued that Bangladeshi government should ensure that its dilemma does not compromises with the constitutional principle. For example, in Article 25 of Bangladesh Constitution, it clearly states that the Bangladesh shall base its international relations on respect for national sovereignty, and any kind of development of aid corridor as such will obviously will interfere with the national sovereignty, especially if Myanmar's military junta is not on board. So that is why the biggest dilemma the government currently faces is that whether it should act as responsible global citizens and provide humanitarian aid to the people who are suffering in the Rakhine state of Myanmar, or how, while doing so, to avoid getting entangled in the Myanmarese conflict as such. And for Bangladesh, it means prioritizing its constitutional mandate that we have discussed before. So it is this mandate that many of the political experts from Bangladesh believe that the interim government should largely keep in mind while making any policy decision. Here it is also very interesting to draw your attention to the fact that many of the political experts in Bangladesh also have argued that any significant changes in the international and foreign policy of Bangladesh, especially if it is done by interim government, shall be unconstitutional. Why it shall be unconstitutional? Because this is not an elected government. So rather, any such kind of major changes, policy shifts should be done only by elected government. And that is why it is very important the elections should be conducted in Bangladesh as soon as possible. So this is also another angle we have to keep in mind. So that is all about this particular video. I hope you got the idea behind the Bangladesh's Myanmar's conundrum. If you like the video, please hit like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more such content. Thank you very much.